time I wouldn't stream
Okay,
anything
welcome
like
everybody. We are ready. Welcome to this conversation. The official program promises you a conversation that spans time, place, and literature. And I think we will be able to do that with authors such as these. They write autobiographically, but they tackle big issues such as migration, identity, language, remembrance, and the looming presence of parents. We have with us Jerry Pinto, author of the delightful novel and the Big Whom, a novel that won 4 awards, the Hindu Prize, the Crossword Prize, the Yale University Prize, and the National Academy's Prize for Fiction. Jerry also works in the library movement and is an advocate for children's rights. And our Norwegian guest is Ivo de Figueiredo, which you will know as a historian and biographer and critic and author of the gripping and acclaimed book, A Stranger at My Table. So I thought we would start with the looming presence of the parents because they are the main characters of the book. In Jerry's case, the mother, and in Ivo's case, the father. They are a couple of larger-than-life figures. In Ivo's book, The Search for the Father reveals a complex figure, and in Jerry's novel, we meet the mother M, she's called M, or as you write, she's most of the time she was M with an exclamation mark. Could you open up with telling us a bit about these parents?
Okay, I think M and the Big Whom was the novel I started writing when I was 16 years old. In the sense, you grow up, I think every young boy grows up with this feeling that my life is so terrible, everybody else is so happy, I'm the one who's got all the problems because my mother is mental. In the sense, I knew when I was a very young boy, someone told me your mother had a nervous breakdown, and you must now be a good boy because she can't take any stress. This didn't bother me actually because I mean, children are naturally selfish, they're naturally self-centered, and if you want to be nasty, you'll be nasty. And I don't think I was bothered that my mother had a problem. I just continued to be a nasty little boy. And this nasty little boy at the age of 16 thought he should write a book about how terrible his life was. So he sat down and he decided it would be over in the summer. I used to do these things for self-improvement. I would read Western philosophy in one summer. Then I would read Eastern ethics in another summer. I would read all the plays of William Shakespeare in one summer. It's a dreadful little snit. Dirty little person who was always going back to college and saying, "What did you do in the summer?" "I finished Shakespeare." But anyway, no one hit me, but I would have hit me if I were alive. Anyway, so I decided I'd write my novel in that summer. And I sat down and I wrote furiously and frantically all summer, and at the end of it I thought, I must find out now how long a novel is. So I went to a friend who was literary, because he read lots of books, and I said, "How long is a novel?" So he took one thin novel off his shelf and he started counting the words in every line. Then he counted the lines, and I thought, I can do mathematics. I can multiply like that. And he said, "This novel has 40,000 words." I was writing War and Peace. I was writing Christiane Lavran's Datir. I was not writing one small little tinky novel like that. So 40,000 words, I thought, "Heh." So I went home and I counted how many words I had written, and I had written 3,000. There's a long way to go before I was going to finish that novel. I finally finished the novel when I was 43. Yeah. Okay? So I often say it took 20 years to write. It took about 27 drafts to do. And most of the drafts were bad, really bad writing, because they were imitative. They imitated who I was reading and who I wanted to be like. So I wrote a Salman Rushdie M and the Big Whom. I wrote a Knut Hamsun M and the Big Whom. I wrote a Leo Tolstoy, I'm in the big home. And then finally, at the age of 40-something, I managed, I think, to write a Jerry Pinto, I'm in the big home. And that happened, I suspect, because my mother was then dead. And some of the wounds had begun to fill in a little. I could now deal with her. I could remember her as she was best. And I could take that best and place it against the worst moments. And I could look at it now as art, not as life. So people say, this is your life, right? And I think you must be joking. Life is boring. Life is trite and trivial, and it's about getting up in the morning and deciding, should I iron this kurta or can I just shake it hard and will it look okay? Should I shave? Should I actually clean up this house before I leave? That's life. We distill life. We take our parents and we squeeze them out. We concentrate them. We focus them. And we create characters out of them. In the process, we eradicate. We remove who they were. And we make them into art. If you do not do that, what you have then is an elephant in the room, a real live character inside a novel will take all the oxygen out of the novel. For art's sake, you must kill what you love. And from its corpse, you must distill what you need to do for the book. Because at that point in time, it's not your parents, it's not you, it's the demand of the book. Which is why writers as a breed are savage baskets. I don't know whether Norway has a problem with like saying dirty words, so I'm going to say, in Goa when we want to say B-A-S-T-A-R-D, we say bloody basket. Okay, so the writers as a tribe, okay, will do what it takes for the book. What it takes. I'm sorry. Does it sound horrid? When you're a writer, you're a horrid person. Otherwise, you step out and you become a nice person, and you work in the library movement, and you work for child rights and all that. But when you're writing, it is savagely about getting those words to perform the ballet of the imagination, to make them dance for you, and more importantly, to leave enough space for you to come in, for the reader to come in and choreograph a new ballet, a ballet that you want to see.
So let me ask you, Ivo, as a member of this savage tribe, about the main character in your book, your father, that you...
Yes, and it's interesting to hear Jerry's perspective, because they think I wrote a non-fiction book, but in reality I never said. I called it a family story. But it's not, maybe some would think that I would disagree much on what you said, but I don't. Because when you write, if you call it a memoir, if you call it fiction, the text is not representing life anyway, it's its own entity. I just had to comment on that.
Yeah.
The difference between, I think, our two books is based on our family stories. I use real names, I commit to reality in a more strict way, but I'm very well aware of that the text is its own entity. And my father is a character, even though I base it as best I could at his actual life, based on sources. So that's an important distinction, or lack of distinction, if you want. Well, this character, my father, which is also an ethical thing, because I don't have his soul in the palm of my hands. This is my interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
So this allows him to have another personality, another life than I can see. You always have to do that, right? This is my world. This is my interpretation. And this character, my father, yes, he was a stranger at my table in my home. He came from somewhere else, and I didn't really know. I knew the bare facts, the dry facts. Go was somewhere, but he was born in Zanzibar. He was Goan, but born in Zanzibar, and he spoke English. and there was some Portuguese name. Too complicated, and it really didn't bother me because I don't think I was so nasty, but of course I didn't care about these things. It wasn't part of my childish world. But it scared me. My father was a scary man and an angry man, which resulted in us a break. At the early age, I shoved him out of my life, mentally first and then physically later. So I think we are exactly this. You're 50, like me? Yeah.
51, 66 born.
Well, 66. Well, we're the same. And you said you've been working on this book since you were 16. I didn't care. I had my own life. I had the wind in my hair. I had hair. Now at this in my mid-40s, in my midlife crisis, this was where I focused all my energy. Then I had the interest and also the strength, a need to turn around and look at this guy, which I then hadn't seen for several years, and who lived and still lives in southern Spain. So I asked, what happened between us? So for me to answer that question, and difficulties, and at the very end, my life. So yeah, it's a long answer to a simple question. Sorry.
That's why you wrote a book.
That's true.
So before we get into the Goa and Indian part, I wanted to ask a little bit more about M, because you mentioned a nervous breakdown. In the book, it's also described as manic depression. And both of these books they carry a lot of warmth for the people they are portraying, but they are also grave portraits of people who are not fulfilling the ideal role of the parent. In your book it says, home was a blood-stained bathroom, home was uncertainty. Could you talk about that uncertainty and those?
See, I think, again, that snot-nosed little boy of 16 who thought, my problem was that my mum did not pack a lunchbox for me, right? She said, eat something, right? And if there was a fancy dress competition, other boys' mothers would make very elaborate costumes for them. And my mother would say, why don't you go as a schoolboy? Get dressed in your school uniform and go and say you're a schoolboy. And actually, no, you can't do that. But actually, there is no such thing as the perfect parent. All parents know this as well, that you fall short of this imaginary and beautiful standard that has been established. In some people who never had children have probably written those books where they produce these perfect parents. My mother was manic depressive. It was a label. It's a label given to certain people who display certain beliefs, who display certain behaviors. What did the label mean? It meant that in my lifetime she tried to kill herself 5 times. And I was witness to 3 or 4 of those attempts, which left me with a certain burden to carry of a certain kind. But what was my burden compared to the burden of a woman who wanted to kill herself so many times? Eventually you come to the point at which you say to yourself, what was your suffering? Yes, home was uncertainty. Other people went home and knew what they were going to experience. My mother's uncertainty was in waking up to herself and recognizing that inside her head something was going to go terribly wrong. My mother's uncertainty was to live in a society that had no words for her, no names for her. For a long time she was just a nervous breakdown. And schizoids, paranoids, people with manic depressive tendencies, people who were only depressed, people with every kind of ailment were all lumped together under one big rubric, which was nervous breakdown. It was as if all of you get into that room. In the psychiatric wards of India till today, people with mental problems must share space with alcoholics in recovery and drug addicts. And all of them will tell you, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a mental patient. And the alcoholic will tell you, I'm not a mental patient, okay? I'm an alcoholic. And the drug addicts will say, I'm not like those people. I'm a drug addict. Everyone's got their own little hierarchy of what is the best thing to be in a mental ward. Our default cure for mental illness is electroconvulsive therapy. We still give shocks until you get 2 burn marks on either side of your head. That's when they let you out of the hospital. You're fine. You're not there. Your entire personality has been erased, but you're fine. You walk in and say, hello, how are you? I am well. That's how you become. You've become a zombie, but you're a functional zombie. You're okay now. You are now the perfect parent. That is our definition of perfection. Iron everybody out until they are all the same layer of dough, and then make cookies. Cut out the cookies. Mummy, 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 ma, I, mummy, 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 daddy, 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 daddy. This is why I have refused to become a parent myself. I'm not going to be a cookie cutter.
Ivo, you also write about the darker sides of your father, his anger, his rage about being afraid of him. Did you have any reservations writing that about him?
Oh yeah. Of course I had. Are we getting into that? Yes, of course there's ethical dilemmas, and for one, I don't deny it. As you said, a savage tribe, yeah, you commit to the text. While writing, you commit to the text. Then comes publishing. Well, my father got demented during the process of me writing, and it's a part of the book. My mother is not. I decided I wouldn't publish it if my mother couldn't live with this. I decided I would publish it, even though my father was demented. And it takes a long answer, but to put it short, I think, well, there are some quite existential problems here that you don't see in the daily news, but which shows in books. For example, where does my personality as a child end, and where does my parents start? Do I have the right to write about my own memories, my own upbringing? How can I then not write about my parents, which I was an extended part of that unity, the family as a small child? So yes, I allowed myself to write this story. I didn't want to elaborate on the violence, on the juicy stuff. Instead, I go to my childhood memories, my memories and my nightmares, and I think I own my nightmares. Yeah. And you can see for yourself and read through the lines and see what was what my motivation for searching for him was. But I also very much agree with Jerry in the way you said that. Yes, what was my suffering? Well, we're sitting here, aren't we? Fairly healthy, writing books. We are the strong. My father is still living, are weak. I have one sentence. I'm trying to translate it in my head. Nothing goes away. You have to keep on carrying everything. Bad translation, sorry. But I mean, for me, I had to be 45 years old to be weak enough, because I was in my charming midlife crisis, and at the same time strong enough to get to a point zero where I could get into this. My strength was that I can carry this now. Of course I can. And if you want to write about another person, you need empathy. If you write a biography on Adolf Hitler, you need empathy. There's no point if you don't, because you want to recreate the process of that person evolving into good or into bad. So you need empathy, and this is not the kind of book that you judge. This is my version, and it's there, and I
was in Spain last week and I gave the book to my father, which was a quite special moment. But he carries it around.
Did he say anything? Did he say anything?
Yeah, but I've interviewed him. He was a part of the process
Yes,
before he got demented. And 95% he would be okay with. So, yeah. I take care of him now with my brothers. So I just wanted to write this book as my one demand.
And I want to ask...
I just want to add something to what Ivo said. After the book was written, many people would ask me, has catharsis happened?
Yes.
Have you released this now? And I would say, and you are a nation of walkers and hikers and people who go on treks. Have you ever carried a very heavy backpack on your shoulders and it's cutting into your shoulders? So then at some point you push your fingers underneath it and pull it out a little. And this part feels so good and relaxed and all because the pain is gone from here. But now the pain is here. That is what happens. It is not as if you set it down. Nothing goes away. What happens is you begin to be able to move with what you have, and you see what you have in a very odd way as a gift. After I finished writing the book, when I had readings in India, they used to turn into encounter groups because people were not accustomed to talking about mental health. So people would stand up and weep and say that, my brother was hearing from God, so we locked him in his bedroom for 8 years. And then just because someone came and said, I also was hearing from God, and I went to a doctor, and it went away because he gave me some pills. We took our brother to a psychiatrist. And I couldn't handle this energy. This energy that was there was raw and painful. And I'm not a professional. I'm not a mental health professional. I wanted sometimes to hug them, but even that might be dangerous. So a friend of mine suggested, tell them to write about it. Tell them to write their stories down. So I started doing that. I kept saying, okay, tell me your story, write it down. And eventually we put together another book called The Book of Light. And all the people who wrote in that book were people who had dealt with the mentally ill, with daughters who had killed themselves, boyfriends who went psychotic on the day before the wedding, stories like that. And at the end of writing and editing and going back and forth with them, I would ask them one question. I'd say, if you could change this in your life, would you? And there would be a moment when they'd think about it, and then they'd say, no. Because who I am now has been so deeply engraved with what this is. I can see that it's a part of me. Now it is a part of who you are. And now you won't give it up. You don't want to give it up. You understand that in a very strange way, what you saw as your misery has now become your gift. It is your gift. And now you can take that gift out into the world and you can make it something else. You can turn it into something beautiful. That's at the end of the day, what writing can give you. The magic and the mystery of writing is the ability to reach beyond with the intensely personal. Just before the book came out, I would get up in the middle of the night and think, 4 Roman Catholic people in Bombay, India, who wants to read about them? Maybe I should have made them Hindus. There are more Hindus in India, more people will read them. And then I'd say, leave it, Jerry. It is the way it is. Trust the book.
You should try to write about Goans in Norway.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah. So that moment of the intensely personal, your story, your peculiar, strange, small story from your tiny corner of the world can open itself out into something for everybody. But you've got to trust that story. And this is the difficult thing. Because the story is an extension of you, and you would not trust you.
Okay, Ivo, you wanted to
I'm thinking while you're talking. There's one, because I'm comparing our 2 books, one interesting dilemma, I think, in this area we're talking about now, because you write about your mother with your mental illness. I write, part of my story is about my demented father. And as an historian, I know that I'm not supposed to expose sources and for their mental illnesses. It's a clear rule when you sign the document to get out the documents from the archives. Then again, as a writer, I don't think dementia is something to be ashamed of because it's a disease, and likewise with mental illness in different forms. And who are going to tell these stories of these people if not the next of kins that are writers?
Yeah.
We need to tell these stories, and the process and the cleansing process that I, in my personal life, experienced with writing this book, because the day I opened that door in Spain and found my father in that demented, terrible state, almost close to death, my own burden went away. Well, good for me, you can say. I can only hope that by writing, that I can share this experience and that other people will recognize, or even it will help other people's process, whether they're going or not. This goes to...
Should we open to the audience now?
Yeah.
20 minutes left.
Yes, I should prepare you that we are taking Q&As from the audience, so all of the shy Norwegian people have sort of to keep this in the back of the head, so so that somebody will ask a question afterwards. But I want to ask you also about the literary form and the language of the novels, because, for instance, the mother, is a delightful character, and her language is really rich. One of her nicknames for her husband is Limb of Satan, because he's always tempting her to sin. And when she's talking to her daughter about an abortion, she's talking about the process of dilation and curettage, and she says, I don't know what that is, but it sounds like they open you up and put a young priest inside of you.
Curettage.
Yes. So you have said that a conversation with her was like walking through a labyrinth, and so much of the book is based on dialogue. So could you say something about the form you chose?
See, I think one of the things about when I was reading books, I would always feel slightly irritable if people told me what to think about the character. I wanted to be able to make my own decision about the character based on what I saw. So through the course of the book, you will, if you should ever read it, I'm told the library has it here. If you should ever read M and the Big Whom, you will find that M is quite savage with her children. She tells them that she lost her life to become a madha, and she hated the idea of being a madha because she now was not herself. She was now part of like this family, and she had given everything away. And then she realizes, she has hurt her children. And she says, oh, you're what my 2 dividends, what lovely dividends you are. And then she would say, but what an investment I made. I put my life into those dividends. So in some strange ways, many people, a very sweet American lady came up to me and said, I read your book and, I think you were abused as a child. So I thought, oh, yeah? That's a nice way of looking at it, but not that I felt it that way. I just thought, we were a large part of the time with M, you were just having fun, okay? Because her idea of a good meal was Coca-Cola and something fried. And if we could eat, like we could eat this from morning to night, that would be fine. And when we were done, we should wrap up the papers and throw them on the floor, because then they would cover the dirt on the floor. It would be like wallpaper on the floor, she would say. Because she had no, if you said, do you think I should have a bath? She'd say, are you smelling? So you'd say, no, then don't have a bath. It's like, so she was the ideal mother for a boy. It's like, the result, of course, is that both he and my sister would have 2 baths a day. Because, parents don't insist that she'd come into the room when you were studying and say, oh God, are you going to become a SWAT? The whole world is out there, go study from it, what are these books? It was a wonderful time to be a child, and I didn't feel abused, but at the same time, there was also this sense of being whisked along on the backwash of a huge boat that you didn't know where it was going, but you were being sailed along with it. And often it would sort of whirl into the sexual, because that was also part of the, I think, of the problem, that there was a constant anxiety about sexuality, about abortions that as a Roman Catholic woman, she felt really guilty about. So they would keep coming up, and children don't want their parents to be sexual beings. They want their parents to be mummy and daddy with no genitals attached. Terrible people, children, really. But that's how they want their parents to be. And here your mother talking about her vagina and your father's penis and, abortions. It's like half the time, which is why we would say M, because we like, stop talking about that. And she said, oh, there you go again, censoring me. So in some ways, the entire book is an apology to her for having tried to tame her in a way. We were her tamers. We were people who took this magnificent, free-ranging spirit and we tied her down in domesticity with our dirty nappies and our school projects and our, our daily need to give to be fed and clothed and sent out into the world. I sometimes, someone asked me, a young woman read the book and said, she was a writer. Can't you see she was a writer? So I said, she's my mother, idiot. Of course I know she was a writer. And she said, but she never got a chance to write, said this young woman. I said, do you not think that I don't know this and I don't feel guilty about it? That I took away my mother's career as a writer as a child? Do you think I don't know this? How can I not? From everything around me, from the way she used language to the way her letters were little performances, her diaries were public property, anyone could read them, and she wanted you to read them and tell her what you thought. Everything was about writing. And as her needy, desperate, demanding, parasitical children, we took her life from her.
Ivo, you also have in your family, in your book, you also use love letters and documents, and the book is full of photographs which are very effective for the reader and very strong documentation, very emotional photography. But you also write about some wonderful scenes of old tapes that your family used to send to each other, full of stories and speeches and songs.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it's a historian in me. Well, maybe it's my fascination for how we get to know things. So, and this if you write about historical things, what you write about is gone. It happened and it's gone. And this family was in this particular situation that they were spread around the globe because of, well, my father was born in Zanzibar, and at the age of 18 they started migrating from the collapsing British colonies in East Africa to the west. So they were spread somewhere in America, somewhere in England, one were in Bøkene in Norway. So they kept, and the parents were trapped, stateless in Nairobi. So they would send, I call it the curry triangle, where they would send pictures, foodstuff, Super 8 movies, and this is how these are my sources. So with the way I write, I'm not only writing about the story that actually happened. I'm writing about it's filtered through the medias. So, for example, we have all looked at Super 8 movies. This dreamy, strange world that is floating on some bed sheet that you put up in a doorway between the kitchen and the living room, right? And I want to scratch on that surface and try to get behind it, and this is what triggers me. This is what creates the emotion and brings me so close to this reality, to these long gone summers before I was born, and my desperate need to be a part of that, but I can't. So I try to put that into writing. Me scratching on the bed sheets between the kitchen and the living room, and this is how we all relate to our pasts, and there's so much information and so much emotions in these sources. Now I should have a medal from the Historical Institute because I'm I'm recruiting historians here, I hope. When you read handwritten letters, you can see the mood. If my father was angry, you would see he would press the pen. If you see teardrops float, which has blurred out the letters, and you feel so close to history. And it helps me recreate in my imagination the scene that I'm searching for.
Okay, I'm very excited to see all the hands in the air for questions. You shouldn't disappoint our guests. Does anybody want to ask them anything?
You should know by now that we will answer anything that you
Yeah,
Anything.
you have a big
We
chance.
are
Okay,
shameless.
there you go.
Yeah.
They're coming to you with a mic.
Yeah.
So
Okay. It's called M-E-M and the big whom.
And it's
H-O-O-M.
here.
Whom.
yes, it's in the library.
Yeah, it's apparently in the library here. I'll write it down for you later. Relax. Yeah, my father was kind of like, M is the mother, the big whom is the father. My father didn't say much. He was a silent person, but he was always there. When I woke up in the morning, he was there. When I went to sleep in the night, he was there. When he would read Sigrid Undset to me, and that's how I came to Norway, because my father read Sigrid Undset to me when I was a child. Happy Days in Norway, and then I think he edited Christian Lavransdatter. As he was reading it aloud, he must have jumped bits, I think, you know. But so my sense of any sense of stability in the universe came out of my father, that I could hang on to him. You know, that any question I had, anything that my mum did to like completely decenter and destabilize me, I would be returned to normal by my father. And that was kind of like, I think, see, at the end of the day, we are all in free fall, right? We are all falling through time and through history. We are all falling through relationships, wondering whether we are loved. Yeah, that's our central, horrible question that plagues our nightmares is, am I loved? That's all there is. I could rest assured that my father loved me, though he never said it in his life. Never. It was not a time when you said these things to children. But I knew from the fact that if I had to get up at 4 in the morning to study, my father was awake at 3:30. And at 4 o'clock, when I got up, my Horlicks was ready, my books were set out, and he was sitting quietly, reading the paper, awake because I was awake. That was as simple as that. If I needed to know how the vernier calipers actually worked, my father would make vernier calipers for me, and we would measure things together. My hair, the width of a pencil, etc., etc. So I understood what these things were like. Yeah, so in some ways there was a huge demonstrativeness and a huge silence wrapped into one man. And that became my model. That became my model for the book also, because one of the rules I set for myself is show, don't tell. Show what it was like and let people tell you what it was. If you tell them, I was in pain, they will not feel pain. If you tell them what hurt you and leave them to understand that you were in pain, they weep for you. It's also what I use when I teach my students. Show, don't tell. Don't tell me someone is witty, show me that she was witty. And that does your job for you.
Do we have another question? Hands in the air.
Yeah.
Yep.
There, two of them. Yeah.
Two of them.
Yeah.
I wonder what other books have you read that we could get hold of?
Written? Read or written?
What other books have you written that we could get
Oh,
hold
okay. I
of?
wrote
and read?
my thing is women, in the sense I would never say I'm a feminist, because then all the feminists, you know, will hit you with an axe and tell you why you're not a feminist. But I've translated a book. There was this wonderful actress of the 1950s who, at the age of 87, wrote her autobiography of Bombay. And it's called I, the Salt Doll. There's another book that I did which was on Leela Naidu, who was a great actress of Indian cinema. She was married to a man called Dom Morais. She acted in films with Jean Renoir and with like everybody. There were greats in her life. So she and I sat and wrote her autobiography together, which I loved. I wrote a book about a dancer in Hindi films called Helen, who did like, the sexy kind of dances for 30 years. For 30 years in Hindi cinema, she did sexy dances. That means she was 48 when she did her last dances, and people were still whistling and throwing money at the screen at her. She was like fabulous, phenomenal person. So, and then I did another translation of an autobiography of a woman her autobiography is called I Want to Destroy Myself. Okay? So, and how did she destroy herself? By marrying this man who treated her miserably. And she writes about him with like casual, happy contempt. And he is one of the greatest of Dalit leaders in India. So it's just like fabulous stuff. I mean, it's not that I'm fabulous. My writing is fabulous. I translate very interesting things. So just look up Jerry Pinto. There are some 25 books or something like that, all which I've written, and all of them happily live in India. They don't travel very well, but they are available on, on e-books and whatnot. So you could possibly get them in.
We have time for one final question. The lady behind you, beside you.
Diane, yeah.
How you both have a connection to Goa, and could you say something about that?
See, my connection to Goa is a peripheral, thin connection because I've never lived there myself. I did edit an anthology of writings about Goa called Reflected in Water, but Goa for me is myth and memory. It's the distillate of what I could have been had I lived in Goa. But my parents migrated to Bombay for economic reality. So Goa was the place to which I went and the dream that I never had.
Yeah, same here. Well, I discovered my Goanness in a mature age. But Goa is a place where people live. It's a place where people are getting educated and becoming European through faith and language and migrate. So we have a large diaspora. And there's a difference between the Goans living in Goa and those living outside, even as close as
you can see the difference.
Bombay. Yeah. One thing I have my helpless Norwegian body language. So I never make this. We come from different parts of the world. I think we never spoke of this. I met Jerry briefly in Goa at a festival, but we have never spoken of this because you have so many ideas of what Goa is. But for the migrants, and for my family who has been, well, it was my great-great-grandfather who left Goa for Zanzibar in the late 19th century. So Goa would be this a golden dream, and they would be, in fact, Anglified. They would be British subjects. But the idea of the homeland, which is, of course, totally wrong, it's a myth. But it's a myth that gives meaning, because they call it's a word for it, Goa Dorado. It's the kind of the dream of the old society of Portuguese Goa. And I have family still living in Goa, and they are in the this movement that wants to give Goa special status. And they don't like Indians. Indians are the worst, because we are not Indians. Yeah. So if you call certain members of my family Indians, they would be offended. You know the dilemma. But when I eventually went to Goa, I experienced this double dilemma. But of course, first I had to decide, am I a Goan? I used to be Norwegian, I still am, but am I also Goan? Coming to Goa, I had to decide, do I belong here? Because that's what my family said. They said, welcome home. And the first thing they said was, you know you're a son of a homeless. Here is your house. It needs mending. You should go back, come back, and be loyal to the earth, to the soil, and to the tradition. You're a Brahmin, you're a Gaunkar, all this. And I had to decide, do I belong here? And no, of course I don't belong here. in a way I do, and I can't be too aggressive in my attitudes towards them, because I come from the leading strata of society, the exploiters, the feudal
class.
Right, and I met with the Hindus, the low-caste people that had very different ideas about what Goa was. But I can't be too hard. These are my people, whether I like it or not. But this is too hard a society for me. So I end up being loyal to the homeless, which was a fine ending of my book, because then I could have some kind of comradeship with my father, the homeless one.
I think we will have to end the conversation on the note of
I'll be wandering
comradeship.
around in my kurta. You'll be able to spot me anywhere. And if you have a question that you didn't ask here and you think, oh gosh, I should have asked, just come up to me and ask me. Happy to answer it in the middle of the road. Yeah?
And I'll be at the bar down at the flea market.
Okay, give them a big hand.
Thank you. Thank you.